Hey everybody, back here with another exciting chapter of the Abarat. We are on chapter 9. It's called Events on the Jetty. And if you don't know what a jetty is, it's almost like a dock, or kind of like a boardwalk that goes out into the water. So, yeah, here we go. Candy heard a chorus of voices all speaking the same word. Lady, they were saying. Lady, lady, lady. It took her several moments to realize that these many voices were all addressing her. It was the Johns speaking. Mischief, Fillet, Sallow, Moot, Drowse, Plucket, Serpent, and Slop. They were all calling to her, trying to get her to wake up. She felt herself tentatively shaken, and, just as tentatively, she opened her eyes. 8 concerned faces were looking down at her, 1 large and 7 smaller. Anything broken? John Fillet said. Candy made a very cautious attempt to sit up. The back of her neck hurt, but it was no worse than the ache she sometimes woke up with when she'd been sleeping in an odd position. She moved her legs and her arms. She wriggled her fingers. No, she said, somewhat surprised at her good fortune, given the distance she'd fallen. I don't think anything's broken. Good, said John Sallow. Then we can get moving. Wait, said Mischief. She's only just... Sallow's right, said John Fillet. We haven't got time to wait. That darn creep Shape is going to be down here in a few seconds. Shape. The sound of his name was enough to make Candy seize Mischief's arm and haul herself to her feet. The last thing she wanted was Mendelssohn Shape's claws around her throat a second time. Where are we off to? She wanted to know. We're going home, lady, Mischief said. You're going to yours, and we're going to ours. He put his hand into his inside pocket. But before I go, he said, dropping his voice to a whisper as he spoke, I wonder if you could possibly do something for me, for all of us, until we meet again. What do you need? Candy said. I just need you to carry something for us, something very precious. From the interior of his jacket, he brought an object wrapped up in a little piece of coarsely woven cloth and secured with a brown leather strap that had been wrapped around it several times. There's no need for you to know what it is, he said. In fact, if you don't mind, it's better if you don't. Just take it and keep it safe for us, will you? We'll be back, I promise you, when Carrion's forgotten about us and we can chance the return trip. Carrion? Christopher Carrion, said John Serpent, his voice laden with anxiety, the Lord of Midnight. Will you take it for us? Said John Mischief, proffering the little parcel. I think if I'm going to carry something, Candy said, I should at least know what it is, especially if it's important. What did I tell you? Serpent said. I knew she wouldn't be content with that it's better if you don't know line. She's entirely too inquisitive, this one. Well, if I'm going to be a messenger girl, Candy said, addressing John Serpent, I think I have a right. Of course you do, Mischief said. Open it up. Go on. It's all yours. Curiously enough, the little parcel seemed to have almost no weight, except for that of the wrapping and the cord. Candy pulled at a large knot, which, although it looked hard to undo, seemed to solve itself the moment she began to pick at it. She felt something move in the parcel. The next moment there was a rush of light out of the bag, which momentarily filled her gaze. She saw several points of brightness appear before her, joined by darting lines of luminescence. They hovered for a moment, then the light sank away into her unconscious and were gone. The whole spectacle, which couldn't have taken more than 3 seconds, left her speechless. You have the key now, John Mischief told her gravely. I beg you not to tell anybody you have it. Do you understand? Nobody. Whatever you say, she replied, looking at the empty bag. Picture. So, that's the jetty, and then the clouds and all this stuff. I actually drew this picture. I made a copy of this picture once, and I don't think I brought them, but they're back at school, so I'll show you. Looking at the empty bag, mystified. Then, after a moment, I don't suppose you're going to tell me what the key opens? Truly, lady, better not. He kissed her hand, bowing as he did so, and began to retreat from her. Goodbye, lady, he said. We have to go. Candy had been facing the tower throughout the conversation. Only now, as Mischief retreated from her, did she realize what a change had come over the world in the brief time in which she'd been unconscious. A ramshackle jetty had appeared out of the ground, and at its far end, large waves were breaking, their weight sufficient to make the structure creak and shake down its entire length. Beyond the breaking waves, the Sea of Isabella stretched off towards a misty blue horizon. Minnesota, at least as Candy had known it, had apparently disappeared, overwhelmed by this great expanse of invading water. How? Candy said, staring at the panorama, slack-jawed with astonishment. How is this possible? You called the waters, lady. You remember, with the cup and the ball? I remember, she said. Now I must go home on those waters, Mischief said, and you must go back home to Chicken Town. I'll return, I promise, when it's safe to do so, and I'll claim the key. In the meanwhile, you cannot imagine what service you do to freedom throughout the islands by being the keeper of that key. He bowed to her again, and then, politely but firmly, he nodded towards Chicken Town. Go home, lady, he said, like a man attempting to send home a dog that didn't want to leave his side. Go back to where you're safe before Shape gets down from the tower. Please. What you carry is of great significance. It can't be allowed to fall into Shape's hand, or rather, into the hands of his master. Why not? What happens if it does? I beg you, lady, Mischief said, the urgency in his voice mounting. Ask no more questions. The less you know, the better for you. If things go wrong in the Abarat and they come looking for you, you can claim ignorance. Now there's no more time for conversation. He had reason for his urgency. There was a loud noise from out of the tower behind him, as Shape attempted to clamber back down the broken staircase. Judging by the din from within, it wasn't an easy job. His weight was causing yet more of the structure to collapse, but it would only be a matter of time, Candy knew, before he navigated the remnants of the staircase and was out through the door in pursuit of them all. All right, she said reluctantly, conceding the urgency of her departure. I'll go, but before I go, I have to have one proper look. At what? The sea, Candy said, pointing off down the jetty towards the open expanse of bright blue water. She'll be the death of us, Serpent growled. No, said Mischief. She has a perfect right. Mischief grabbed hold of Candy's hand and helped her up onto the jetty. It creaked and swayed beneath them, but having dared the tower's stairs and balcony, Candy wasn't in the least intimidated by a little rotten wood. The jetty shook violently with every wave that struck it, but she was determined to get to the end of it and see the Sea of Isabella for herself. It's amazing, she said, as they proceeded down the length of the jetty. She'd never seen the sea before. All thought of Shape and his claws had vanished from her head. She was entranced by the spectacle before her. I still don't see how it can have happened, she said. A sea coming out of nowhere? Oh, this is the least of it, lady, Mischief said. Out there, far off from here, are the 25 islands of the Abarat. 25? One for every hour of the day, plus the 25th hour, which is called Odom Spire, which is a time out of time. It all sounded too strange and preposterous, but then here she was standing on a jetty looking out over a sea that hadn't existed 10 minutes before. If the sea was real, and real it was, or else why would her face be cold and wet? Then why not the islands too, waiting where the Sea of Isabella met the sky? They had come to the end of the jetty. She gazed out over the waters. Fish leapt up, silver and green. The wind carried seabirds, the likes of which she had never seen or heard before. In just a few seconds, Mischief and the brothers were going to be gone into these mysterious waters, and she was going to be left to return to her boring, suffocating life in Chicken Town. Oh, God, Chicken Town after all this? These wonders, these miracles? Chicken Town? The thought was unbearable. "When will you come back?" she said to Mischief. "Wait, lady," Mischief replied. "What?" "Stay very still." As he spoke, he went into the outer pockets of his jacket, and he pulled out, of all things, an old-fashioned pistol. It was a small weapon, and it looked as though it was made of brass. "What are you doing?" she said, dropping her voice to a whisper. "Doing what I can," he said softly, "to save our lives." She saw his eyes flicker over his shoulder in the direction of somebody on the jetty behind her. "Shape?" she murmured. "Shape," he replied. "Please, lady, don't move." So saying, he suddenly stepped to the side of her and he fired. Bang! There's a loud crack, and a plume of purple-blue smoke erupted from the barrel of the pistol. A moment later, there was a second sound, much less loud, as the bullet struck its intended target. Candy knew immediately what John Mischief had done. He hadn't shot Shape. He fired at the cup on the top of the pyramid, and the ball had jumped out of it. She could instantly sense the massive change in the air around them. "Nice shot," said Sallow. "Though why you couldn't have put a bullet through Shape's eye defeats me." "I take no pleasure in putting holes in living things," Mischief said, pocketing the gun. Candy glanced over her shoulder. Shape was standing about halfway along the jetty, glancing back towards the tower. It was clear that he too knew what Mischief had done. How could he doubt it? The air was vibrating with the news. "The tide's changing, lady," Mischief said, "and I have to go with it. Shape will follow me, all being well, because he believes I have the key." "No, wait," Candy said, seizing hold of Mischief's arm. "Don't do this." "Don't do what?" said John Moot. "I don't want to go back to Chicken Town." "Where else can you go?" said John Sallow. "With you." "No," said John Serpent. "Yes," said Candy, "please. I want to go into the water." "You have no idea of the risks you'd be taking." "I don't care," Candy said. "I hate where I live. I hate it with all my heart." As she spoke, she felt the wind change direction. The waters around the jetty had become highly agitated now, almost frenzied, in fact. The tide was turning on itself, and in the process making the antiquated boards of the jetty rattle and shake. She knew she only had a few seconds to persuade Mischief and his brothers. Then they'd be gone, into the waters and away with the tide, away to the Abarat, wherever that was. And what chance did she have of ever seeing them again, once they'd gone? Sure, they'd tell her they'd come back again, but what was a promise worth? Not much in her experience. How many times had her father promised never to slap her again? How many times had she heard him swear to her mother that he was going to give up drinking forever? None of it meant anything. No, once they were gone, she might very well never see them again. And what would she be left with? A memory and a life in Chicken Town. "You can't do this to me." "Oops. You can't do this to me," she told Mischief. "You can't leave me here not knowing if you'll ever come back." As she spoke, she heard the jetty creak behind her. She looked around, already knowing what she would see. Mendelssohn's Shape was coming down the jetty towards them. For the first time, she saw quite clearly why he limped, and perhaps why he hadn't been quite agile enough to catch hold of her. He was missing his right foot. It was severed at the ankle, and as he walked on the stump, as though it were a peg leg. If it gave him any pain, he didn't display it. He wore his arrowhead-toothed grin as he approached his victims, spreading his arms like an old-style preacher, welcoming them into his lethal flock. Candy knew that she still had a chance to escape, but she had no desire to turn back. Even if it meant risking life and limb to stay here on the jetty with Mischief, it was worth the risk. She grabbed a fierce hold of Mischief's hand and said, "Wherever you all go, I go." 8 faces looked at her wearing 8 different expressions. Follette looked perplexed. Sallow blinked. Moot feigned ignorance. Drowse laughed. Pluckett sucked in his cheeks. Serpent scowled, and Slop blew out his lips in exasperation. Oh, and Mischief? He gave her a wide but unquestionably desperate smile. "You mean it?" he said. Shape was 30 yards from them, closing fast. "Yes, I mean it." "Then it seems we have no choice," he said. "We have to trust the tide. Can you swim?" Not very well." "Oh, Lordy Lou," Mischief said, and this time all 8 faces did the same thing. They rolled their eyes. "I suppose not very well will have to do." "Then what are we waiting for?" Candy said. In the time it had taken them to have this short conversation, Shape had half the distance between his claws and their throats. "Can we please go?" Drowse said, yelling louder than a head so small had any business yelling. Hand in hand, Candy and Mischief raced to the end of the jetty. "1," said Philip. "2," said Plucket. "Jump," said Slop. And together they leapt into the air, committing their lives to the frenzied waters of the Sea of Isabella. And that is the end of Chapter 9. And it's also the end of Part 1. So tomorrow we will start on Part 2, which is called Twilight and Beyond. And it'll start with a poem, but I'm going to save that for tomorrow. Okay, I hope you guys are enjoying the book, and I hope you're all happy and healthy at home. I know this homeschooling thing isn't exactly the same, but we miss you guys, and we're going to keep trying to find ways to get more interactive with you. I think next week is going to show some big changes. So it's a beautiful day outside. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, get out there. I'm going to try to, and I will see you by the fire tomorrow. Bye.